You're listening to the Brave Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Susan Maples. I'm here for all parents who deeply love their children and want their health span to equal their lifespan. In other words, to be healthy their entire lives. If that's you, tune in. In every episode, we're grappling with contemporary issues that affect every child every day in areas that your doctors either don't know or don't have time to tell you. It's your time to be brave. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our third podcast. This is our third, Lauren?
It's our fourth.
Our fourth podcast. And today we're talking about the subject of digest, which is gut health and microbial health. We just finished talking the last two podcasts on eat and relationships to food and what to eat and drink, what to drink and what not to drink. And now we're going to talk about what the gut does with all that and why we've had such a massive increase in digestive disorders. And many of you know this because 10 years ago, you never heard of things like, well, maybe you'd heard of reflux or heartburn, but certainly all this ulcerative colitis and chronic immune problems and leaky gut and inflammatory bowel disease and ulcerative colitis and all sorts of other digestive disorders that have been on the rise. And it all has to do with the gut microbiome. And the research on microbiome is expanding every day. So we've learned so much about the bugs that live in our gut and how they help us and how they hurt us.
You know, Susan, I'll have to say that, this is probably one of my favorite chapters from your Brave Parent book. And it's funny because I've noticed even in the previous 3 episodes, like you would bring up the digest section, right? It's such a core piece of our health. And I feel like it's one that, first of all, many of us don't have a lot of education behind. I mean, it was very informative going through your book on this section, especially because it was a lot of things that should be common knowledge. And I didn't feel like it was. And then especially how it feeds into everything else that we do think about first when it comes to health, like what we're eating and what we're drinking and all of that.
I think, Lauren, that our curiosity was piqued by COVID. Because never before did people start grappling with bugs and what does this mean and how, we over sanitized everything. When I use the word over sanitized, obviously I'm making a biased judgment and I'm going to tell you why I believe that. But now we're kind of more curious about bugs and how they hurt us and how they help us and what to do. So I found it funny that during COVID, while I was getting busy really putting this book to ink, I was really amazed at how we became this sort of germophobic society, right? Yeah. And I looked up germophobia in Wikipedia to get a description because it's literally a subtype of obsessive compulsive behavior or disorder. And it's typified by all these things: excessive hand washing, avoiding locations that might contain a high presence of germs, a fear of physical contact, especially with strangers, excessive effort and dedicated to cleaning and sanitizing our environment, a refusal to share personal items, and a fear of becoming ill. So does that sound like COVID? Yeah.
Yes.
We got obsessed as a globe with our germs are here and we got to kill them all. And we're trying to desanitize our own bodies. And that the backlash of that will be significant. It is significant. So we have to stop and really look at what is the benefit. I mean, it's crazy to me to think that for every human cell, we carry 11 bugs with us along for the ride, living in us in every crevice of our eyes, nose, and mouth, skin.
Okay, hold on.
Gut.
Let's pause for a moment, especially when you're talking about bugs in the eyes. Okay, because this is something that we had talked about when you were writing this chapter where I was like, can you just paint this picture? Because I'm a very visual person. And when you're talking about bugs being in my eye, like what does this actually look like? Like, can you kind of describe these bugs for people who are like me, where they're picturing almost cockroaches versus
if you zoom in on your skin and, in your gut and all that, even in our gut alone, we carry 3.5 pounds for a healthy person, 3.5 pounds of gut bugs. I mean, and they're microscopic. So we're talking about massive populations of bugs, and the more diverse, the better.
But we want these 3.5 pounds, right? It's not
Oh
like
my gosh,
yeah,
yes.
3.5 pounds.
Oh yes. And by killing off, like in any natural environment, I'm sitting here on the coast of Florida right now, and during certain times of the year, we get this red tide where when the dumping of chemicals into the water has suppressed some of the bugs and others overbloom. I see it all the time in the mouth. We see yeast infections, candida, flourish because we've suppressed bugs either with antibiotics or steroids, because antibiotics kill everything, right?
Yeah.
But when I think about zooming in, I think a lot of people don't really see this. This is something I usually like Google search for my team or for my patients: white blood cell in pursuit of bacteria. I want to do like a little video for them on what does it look like when you're looking at a bug. This is a bacteria bug, and I don't know if you can see it, but is it moving? That white blood cells going after the little tiny bacteria bug. You see the little black bug it's chasing? The other blobs are red blood cells. And it's literally going to envelop or try to eat that little tiny bacteria. This is a pathogen.
Like
it's
Pac-Man. We're watching Pac-Man.
It's exactly where Pac-Man came from, I'm pretty sure. And it literally digests that little guy and poops out the excrement. And the excrement shows up as inflammatory markers that hail up more white blood cells to the area to clean up the site.
So and pause real fast too, because for all of those who are listening versus being able to see this on Instagram or Facebook, if you want to see the video, make sure to go to the Be a Brave Parent site so you can see this. But it's also a video on YouTube, right? Is it? What's
white blood cell? White blood cell in pursuit of bacteria, and there'll be a bunch of them.
So check it out.
Yeah. I like to show people when I show like a little red gum tissue around the, or, between their teeth or something. This is really what's happening there.
Wow.
Your body is having to deal with this invader. Now, many of these pathogenic bugs that aren't good for us, are in check because of all the good bugs we carry, right? You've heard for years when somebody is going through chemotherapy and they weaken their immune system by killing all these bugs. And then of course they're subject to getting an overload of a pathogenic bug. Yeah. So when we see people who suffered during COVID, it was not just about the bug, because first of all, it has to do with how much of the bug you got inoculated with. If you had a good juicy wet kiss with a cute guy, Lauren, who had happened to be COVID positive and didn't know it, you might get a huge dose. But the bigger part of it was how your body responded to it. If you had a whole plethora of really good protective bugs, and you were not suffering from chronic inflammation, and we can talk about inflammation here or another time, you would survive that. It turned out that what really caused people's downfall was kind of the big hyperinflammatory metabolic syndrome. So obesity, which is inflammatory, insulin resistance, which is inflammatory, and hypertension, which is part of cardiovascular disease, all inflammatory diseases. And this, by the way, this video I just showed is a picture of what bacterial inflammation looks like.
Wow.
So it's a big, massive area, but what we really want to simplify it down to today is the more families of bugs, the better. We have 10 viruses for every human cell and 1-to-1 bacteria. So 1 bacteria for every cell. And we're born in an encapsulated womb that is virtually, I say virtually because now we have some research that we do transfer some of our bacteria to babies, but they are virtually sterile when they come out. And if they're lucky enough to be born through a vagina, they're born face first, face down, mouth open, right through the vaginal microbiome, which is a whole rich plethora of bugs in the vagina, into the mom's alimentary canal. So there's poop there, mouth open.
Yeah. And
they're picking up gut bacteria. And then they're moving up on the skin to suck from a breast. So they get skin microbiome, a different family of different organization of families of bugs. And they're starting to develop this rich exposure to bugs. In the meantime, right from the womb. And in the meantime, the mom doesn't have breast milk. Why not? because the baby doesn't have the digestive stamina. It doesn't have enough bugs to digest it. Over that first few days, those bugs are multiplying and the baby's getting more and more and more bacteria, and the mom's milk comes in. So it's miraculous.
Yeah, it really is.
C-section babies, on the other hand, they make a slit in your tummy and they bring the baby out through it, and the baby has not had that chance. Now, what we're seeing now, without great research behind it, but it makes so much sense, is that for C-section babies, we're packing the vagina with gauze and picking up the vaginal microbiome and swabbing that newborn baby's face.
Fascinating.
Yeah. To try to give them some exposure to mom's vaginal and alimentary microbiome.
But is this a standard practice, or you said it's just now coming in?
No, but you can request it.
Okay.
And that's
yeah,
you can request it. It makes sense. And we just haven't had enough long-term big studies to show the difference, but this will come. And I mean, I believe it will. So this has been super interesting, because in our country, we are at like 33% C-section rate,
wow,
which is super high.
Yeah.
And I want to say 32% of the 10,000 US babies born every day are C-section. And the World Health Organization considers the ideal to be 10 to 15%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Significant.
So more than double our rate of C-sections. Now, you can say what you will about the reasons for that. A lot of times it's, more lucrative for the doctors. It's easier for mom to schedule the C-section. My orthodontist said she had stop and drop, she wanted this time off work scheduled, and she scheduled C-sections and had her babies and came back to work right away, and so there's a lot of that. But also, we have a very obese population. 50% of our adults are obese. And so we have this overweightedness has put women in a higher risk for delivery. So that's part of why it is. But the C-section rate does not give a baby a good start.
See, and it's good to know, though, because it's one of those things where, is this anything that's actually discussed for those who are debating an option?
Exactly. I think it's important that you talk to your doctor about it ahead of time and say, if at all possible, I want a vaginal delivery, even if you've had a C-section by emergency. They call that VBAC, vaginal birth after C-section. And it's very possible that you can have that. Instead of saying, well, you already had a C-section, you already have a little scar, we open up the same thing, it's quicker, easier, and all of that, but it's not as good for the baby, and we know this.
But this is still good in the sense of even knowing that you have the option to ask, even if you have to have a C-section, about what did you call it? Like the swab happening afterwards?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, so I think it's important for, expecting moms to know that that's an option that they can request, so that their baby does have that.
And this is becoming pretty well known, and mommy bloggers and people, probably on this podcast have all probably heard of that, but it's a really, really important thing to ask for. And then, we start to think about the diversity of foods, because probably in 50 years, we've decreased our microbial diversity in half, which is really where we're starting to see this, what we call atopic march, the increase in allergies, allergic dermatitis, atopic dermatitis, which is eczema, and then the allergic rhinitis, the chronic runny nose from allergens, the increased allergies from foods that we eat, and asthma and other autoimmune problems from a lack of diversity of these bugs. So much of this is preventable. And we tend to think it's sort of genetic, but our genetics hasn't changed in 50 years. We know that. So why is it that this has happened so fast? We've been trying to figure it out sort of willy-nilly. The American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, Autoimmune Problems, AAAI, can look up the name. Anyway, they sort of said, like, let's not introduce highly allergic foods to kids early on. Let's wait a while And it turned out that the allergies went up and up and up. So
Mm.
now they've really flip-flopped that. And we want to introduce the most highly allergenic foods to kids right along with other whole foods, which we do usually 4 to 6 months, one at a time. So protein and vegetables first, one at a time. And then we're also introducing allergenic foods like dairy and soy and nuts, peanuts and tree nuts and things like that. So we have to you have to know that we just haven't figured it all out yet. The best thing you can do to reduce allergies for kids is, again, to continue to look at increasing the diversity of our food.
Mm.
The number one thing we can do.
Good advice.
Yeah. And when I think about that, I think about, we all get in a rut, we sort of eat the same things every day, you buy the same things in the grocery store, you know where to go to get your things. And we typically have narrowed things right down.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, in the top 50 foods that we consume in the United States, there isn't one piece of produce except potatoes. And that accounts for French fries and potato chips, right? So we have to continue to, as parents, expand our own diversity of foods and try new things as we look back at the one food rule that says we need 7 tastes of a food to start to like it. We look at neuroplasticity and organizing the brain around new preferences, organizing new preferences around the things that we continue to try.
Absolutely.
So that's super important. Number one for microbial diversity is diversifying our food.
Which is easy. I mean, that's something that's within our immediate control, right? Like that's something that we can implement today to make a difference.
Absolutely. Other things that we need to be cautious of are, we moved to industrialization. We moved to dishwashers and washers and dryers instead of drying our clothes. We stopped playing outside so much when we got off the farms, into our homes and picked up our food in the grocery store. Yeah. So our environment has changed. Our exposure to bugs is drastically reduced. And then we really got crazy when we started with antimicrobial soaps and shampoos and hand sanitizers with alcohol in it, and all the stuff we use to commercial household products that when you walk in your house and it smells like cleaning solution, and we go, oh, the house smells so good. No, that's not how humans should live. And I'm not saying you want a dirty house. I'm saying we need to be reasonable and allow ourselves to live as part of the animal kingdom in the world that we're in, not in these sterile little bubbles, right?
It was really fascinating to me because I went to go get fingerprinted the other day so I could volunteer at my kid's school. And I made some joke. I was like, what happens when you cannot get, fingerprint? Then what happens? They just can't, they won't be approved or what? He goes, believe it or not, we have a hard time, especially these days, with a lot of people who have overused, antibacterial, everything. Yeah. He said, we can't get a fingerprint on a lot, especially healthcare workers, of course, and everything else. I'm sure that's not new in that realm, but I was like, that is fascinating to me because it almost made me freak out a little bit in the sense of losing your fingerprint, because that's part of your identity in a lot of ways. That's what makes you
Crazy,
you.
isn't it?
Yeah, it was so weird for me to think about that.
Yeah, that's crazy. We, again, we are so tempted to have our kids. I see all these parents traveling around now with little alcohol hand sanitizers.
Guilty.
Strapped to their backpacks, and everybody's doing this, rubbing alcohol. We're really decreasing our microbiome. So let's move on and talk about antibiotics, because that's an area that gosh, when I was in dental school, they basically said no one overdoses antibiotics, we give them for everything, right? And we started looking at a whole bunch of bugs that are on the rise that are resistant to antibiotics. One of the first was tuberculosis, and they had a group of prisoners that were being sent to different prisons, and they had spread this antibiotic resistant tuberculosis place to place that was not sensitive to rifampin and isoniazid, the two drugs that were really had been used well on TB. So those were some of the first, but MRSA and some of these others are just crazy. We are absolutely, in my lifetime, we will see a bacterial outbreak, sort of like we just saw with coronavirus, that spreads that's not resistant to antibiotics. And when I say that, part of it is because the drug manufacturers, the overuse of antibiotics has caused them to be ineffective. So like the Z-Pack, everybody wants a Z-Pack for something or another, and they ask for it.
Yeah.
I have a cold, I need a Z-Pack.
Yep.
And the cold is what? A virus. Doesn't work. But because we've overused it, the Z-Pack is down to about, I don't know, half. It's not, but the effectiveness has slowly been decreasing. So about 50% efficient. And when we need new antibiotics further up the food chain, the antibiotic resistance has caused the pharmaceutical companies to ratchet down their budgets and just not develop new ones, because they don't stay around that long before they're ineffective. So it doesn't make sense for them to build all this research and development around antibiotics. It's not going to be around very long. So we are in some really serious trouble, and it doesn't matter what book you pick up on microbiome research, whether it's Missing Microbes or Let Them Eat Dirt, or the what's the one on the coming plague? I think it's might be called the plague. It's really about the whole antibiotic resistance and superbug theories. It is coming so much faster than we ever anticipated. So we're in trouble there.
What do you feel like are some of those, again, I love the immediate actions, right? Like what can we do to actually contribute to making a change in this?
Well, you can have conversations with your doctor and pediatrician. You can allow them to use their brains instead of insisting that you get an antibiotic. When you take a sick child in, whether it's an earache or whether it's you're worried about them having a fever and you think it's coronavirus, just to be safe, let's put them on an antibiotic. No, even with earaches, we recommend they wait 48 hours at least, so many of those clear up on their own. But it's really important to allow doctors to use their own discretion on this, and not to say, I came here for an antibiotic. Yeah. Like, let's talk about that reasonably. But we also have to remember, Lauren, that 60% of the antibiotics produced today go to livestock. And we eat it. We receive antibiotics through milk and meat. That's a real problem for us. Why do we give antibiotics to animals? Why would you think we did?
It's a good question.
Well, a lot of people would suggest that because we keep we keep animals in feedlots where they're so close to each other, that we put them on antibiotics to keep them from getting sick from communicable diseases, right? It's true that that's how it all started, but unfortunately they noticed, or I should say fortunately for them and unfortunately for us, they noticed that these animals got fatter quicker. And so now we give it to them because we can fatten them up for slaughter quicker and get it to market quicker, which is a huge benefit for them financially, not so much for us. But now think about this. If we're eating livestock that has antibiotics, it not only wreaks havoc with our diversity of our microbiome, which is what we're talking about today, but it also fattens you up. So the obesity in children comes a lot from eating antibiotics through meat and cheese and milk. So one thing you can really do is always choose animals that were humanely treated. In other words, they weren't packed together in feedlots. They weren't fed antibiotics, and they were allowed to go outside and see the light of day and eat real grass and stretch their limbs and be an animal before they were slaughtered, instead of being a part of a project. I don't know what to call it.
I think that whole thing is just even fascinating in itself, like from being an animal lover, but it's also a reflection, I feel like, is how quickly someone's view or processes can change when money is involved, right? And like we always want to assume that people have our best interest in mind, but and I know they're cows, but it's still a reflection, right? Like maybe the intention behind it was pure, right? We don't want these cows getting sick. I mean, you had to save money, right? You don't want to lose money on a cow that gets sick, but then it became, oh, this is what's happening. The cows are fattening up. So it's no longer about like health. It's about,
And if you think about, the fact that it costs more to buy milk that's antibiotic free, eggs that are free range chickens and antibiotic free, all of that stuff, right? If you think about that, of course it costs more. It takes longer to grow an animal to maturity because, because we're not feeding them antibiotics. So when we look at that alone, it's worth it. And if you think it's too much money to spend on your family and you can get milk and eggs and meat cheaper, just serve less of it. Focus on more produce. And we were just talking the other day about when you go to the grocery store, we think about how much money we spend to eat out and fast foods and things like that. Like it makes sense to learn how to make real food.
yes.
Whole grains and fruits and vegetables with the meat and the cheese as the garnish. And that is an important thing to remember. But back to the antibiotic thing, we see all this premature breast development in boys and girls, by the way. It's really from the antibiotics, and it's from the antibiotics we're getting from livestock most. So
yeah, it's terrifying. Especially how, again, I feel like you go to the doctor, right? And maybe you're bringing that issue up. It's not going to be what they tell you. So it's so important to know this information, like what is actually happening. And again, those little changes you can make within your household to see massive results for the health.
I also think like you look at this antibiotic, when you take an antibiotic or eat one, it's going after a bug that you want to get rid of, but it also goes after all the bugs.
So you can't just direct it towards that one bug.
And then you stop taking it, you think, oh, they'll all grow back in a couple of days. It takes months. So if you're a kid like I was, chronically ill with pneumonias and things like that from my chronic lung problems, and my story well, but chronic antibiotics. And I also had chronic UTIs even as a baby. So the chronic antibiotics caused the obesity in me, caused the premature development, caused my early periods, all of that stuff. And I didn't even know that my body had been manipulated. I was just trying to stay alive. Yeah. So when you have, the ability to team up with really good doctors who can look at your body more from a wellness standpoint than just dealing with sickness. If you have that kind of a doctor, please thank your doctor. And if you don't have that person, find that person, to treat you and your kids. Yeah.
Well, I would definitely recommend that everyone reads chapter 4 of Brave Parent for more details of everything you've talked about today. But give me 3 major takeaways from Digest that you want people
start with breast milk. Breast milk's important. It's a magic potion. Avoid C-sections if you can, when you can. Let kids play outside, get dirty and play in dirt. And, they shouldn't eat animal feces. Other than that, like playing in well, and you got to teach them that. You have to be careful of sandboxes because animals love sand. It's like a giant litter box for some. But the fact of the matter is, besides that, it's really good to play outside and to get dirty. Resist the urge to like hand sanitize, like have them come in and wash with real soap and water before meals, and wash their hands with real soap and water before meals, and then don't be afraid for them to use their towel twice and to wear a t-shirt that play clothes that haven't been washed and sanitized and dried all the time. And dogs, we didn't really talk about dogs, but dogs play outside. So when kids nuzzle up with a puppy, even from birth, even pre-birth, we're showing that moms that have dogs in the house that cuddle with their dogs, the babies have a stronger microbiome. So dogs, especially because kids are playing on electronic stuff and playing indoors a lot more than outdoors, at least dogs give them some more exposure to the outdoors. So those are some of the big issues. Eat real food and avoid, animals and milks that have been treated with antibiotics. And
get a dog.
and get a dog. And I love that. And a lot of people, there's a lot of advantages to dogs, as you know. But a lot of people wonder about prebiotics and probiotics. Probiotics are little tablets full of good microbugs, which are awesome. But remember, I mentioned that that mature gut is a home to thousands of strains and 3.5 pounds of bacteria. These are like little, they're not going to just replace everything after an antibiotic. It's important to be on good solid doses of probiotics, especially for the months following an antibiotic. But we can't expect that to do everything. We are going to see some great research coming forward about how we're going to be able to use probiotics for autoimmune problems. And prebiotics are just really, really good fiber, plant-based fiber that feed the bugs in your gut. Remember that fiber is our number one nutrient deficiency. And in order to develop a rich microbiome of multiple diversity, they need food too. And fiber it comes in here, stays in the tube, comes out the poop chute, never goes out into the body. Its purpose is to slow the digestion, slow the release of sugar. All this is great for us. And it gets all the way down into the duodenum where it feeds these rich populations of bugs that flourish. So plant-based fiber is super important. Fruits and vegetables of multiple colors and multiple of species. So that's probably it.
There's more. There's always more with that.
Yes, no, but you wanted major takeaways. I would say those
that'll be part two. Well, it's one of those topics that I feel like it could be, I mean, already, right? There's so much that comes up in my mind as we talk about it, even after reading the book, like everything. So it's probably one of those episodes that we'll have to revisit. So
absolutely. It's been fun for me because bringing this into my audiences of dentists and physicians looking at airway disorders and stuff, which we're going to talk about next. How do we reduce the congestion in the nose so people can use their nose and breathe better, which affects their facial development? And allergies cause a lot of mucus. And so we have to take a look at microbiome diversity and healthy microbiome to reduce allergens, to get the nose open to breathe better. So that's where we're going next.
Perfect opportunity to tune in to episode 5, all about breathe. If you have any questions, if you're watching this on Facebook and Instagram, please be sure to leave those in the comments so Dr. Susan Maples can connect with you and answer your questions and help you along. And then be sure to pick up your copy of Brave Parent to learn even more about Digest.
I thank you, audience, and also you, Lauren. It's really fun to work with you. And I'm super open to suggestions and questions and comments because I'm really here for you. I really want to make sure you get your questions answered. So please be sure and reach out.
Especially considering this topic in the age of COVID is one of the most confusing to really know what side of the issue you need to be on. Having the most education you can just helps you make the best decision for you and your family. And that's what Susan is all about to help you with. So we will see you next time.
Thanks. Bye now. Thank you for listening to the Brave Parent podcast with your host, Dr. Susan Maples, author of Brave Parent, and Lauren Eckert, founder of Burning Soul Press. Be sure to leave a podcast review and grab your copy of Brave Parent on Amazon or Audible or wherever you choose to buy your books. Bye for now.